The studio had that late-night buzz that feels like caffeine for the eyes. Blue neon washed the brick backdrop. The desk gleamed, clean, angled toward confrontation. Greg adjusted his tie, the almost smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer boomed, "please welcome Prince Harry." For a half-breath, the room caught itself. This was novelty you could monetize. Then the claps came, dutiful and bright. The red walkway looked longer than usual, or maybe it was the step-by-step calculation in the guest stride. Harry emerged in a midnight suit with a tireless collar, California formal, and a posture somewhere between parade and pushback. He shook Greg's hand with a politician's firmness and an athlete's quick release. No extra warmth. No need. "Harry," Greg said, standing just long enough to make the welcome look generous. "Thanks for coming." "Of course," Harry answered, settling in, crossing one leg with deliberate economy. "It's important to speak for oneself." Greg leaned back, pen angled, eyes alert. "We appreciate it. Lots to talk about. New projects, new home, new worldview." A polite laugh swirled through the audience like seltzer losing its fizz. Harry gave the sort of smile that lives only from the nose down. "Worldviews change when you stop being managed and start deciding," he said, measured. "Agency is unnerving, I realize." Greg's pen did a tiny tap. 1, 2, like a drummer checking time. "Agency," he repeated, tasting the word. "We'll get there. Start easy. How's life? Real life. School runs, grocery runs, the mundane things you once had footmen for." Harry's jaw set, almost imperceptibly. "I quite enjoy the mundane," he said. "It's honest. It doesn't demand a balcony wave." A few laughs. One unkind. Greg filed the line. "So you'd say you've traded the balcony for the back garden?" he asked. "I'd say I traded pageantry for participation." A pause, razor thin. "There's a difference." Greg nodded as if conceding a point in chess he planned to win 3 moves later. "And yet you're here. Cameras, lights, millions watching. Participation can look suspiciously like performance in this zip code." Harry's smile tightened. Choosing to speak isn't the same as being forced to pose. The audience liked that. Clean turn of phrase, crisp enough for captions. Greg clocked the reaction and let it pass. "All right," he said. "Let's address the elephant wearing a crown. You left the most visible family business on the planet. In your words, for freedom, for privacy, for peace. But since then, documentaries, a memoir, interviews. Help viewers reconcile the math. Less exposure by doing more exposure." Harry's gaze didn't waver. "You call it exposure. I call it correction. Silence was a story other people wrote for me. I edit my own work now." Greg's mouth twitched, a micro-smile with edges. "And your critics would say you found a very profitable editor." A ripple ran through the audience, half amusement, half warning. Harry didn't blink. "Survival requires resources," he said. "So does doing work you believe in." "Work like?" Greg asked, a hand open, inviting specifics. Harry ticked them off on calm fingers. Mental health advocacy, veteran transition support, community resilience. If that bores your viewers, I'm happy to recommend something louder. A handful of claps. Greg let them die. "I'm rarely bored," he said, "but I'm allergic to euphemism. Resilience can hide a lot of press tours. And comedy can hide a lot of contempt," Harry returned, soft as an uppercut. The room leaned forward as one. Greg's pen hovered. "Speaking of contempt, let's talk family. You said often you felt unsupported, unseen, unheard. Choose your UN word. Meanwhile, a lot of folks admire your brother and his wife for doing the job, keeping calm, soldiering on. Is there regret? Distance? Do you want reconciliation? Or is this chapter shut?" The word, brother, changed the air. Harry shifted, not fidgeting, but recalibrating. "I won't litigate family on a stage," he said. "Some would say you already did," Greg replied, almost kindly. A low ooh skimmed the audience. Harry inhaled once, slow. "Telling my story isn't litigation. It's context. Context usually has nouns and verbs," Greg said. What would reconciliation look like, verbally? Honesty, Harry answered, and not the PR kind that treats truth as a temperature to manage. Greg gave the pen a single tap. You've used that line before. Because it remains true, Harry said. Silence stretched. Cameras breathed. Across the desk, a duel of stillness. Greg pivoted, easy as a billiard shot. You've talked about being the spare. Fair or not, that's a brand now. Memes, headlines, essays. Does it feel liberating to say it out loud? Or like a tattoo you can't wash off? Harry stayed into the lights briefly, then back to Greg. Labels lose power when you don't accept their terms. And yet, Greg said gently, your book put the term on billboards. Harry didn't flinch. Sunlight, Greg. Words lose their sting in it. Greg allowed himself a small nod, acknowledgement without agreement. Okay, let's go to America. You say California gave you breathing room. Others say it gave you a production slate. Are you happier as a citizen than you ever were as a subject? I'm happier as a person, Harry said. As a husband, as a father. The audience softened at that. Human details through rooms. Greg let it warm them for 3 seconds. No more. Parenting in public is messy, he said. You've been vocal about protecting your kids' privacy. How do you draw a line when your work, by your own description, uses your biography? Harry's reply came precise. A boundary isn't hypocrisy. It's a fence. My children don't owe the world a view over it. A smattering of applause. Strong line. Greg filed it with the earlier two. He leaned in now. Barely. Enough that the lenses caught the shift. Last one. For this block, he added, almost amiably. You say you're done with the monarchy's script. But your critics think you've just swapped directors, palace handlers for streaming XX, press secretaries for publicists, courtiers for consultants. In what scene are you truly unscripted? Harry's face was a calm mask, the kind that says has learned everything the hard way. This one, he said. Right now. A beat. 2. Greg looked to his audience, then back to the guest. Good, he said softly. Then don't flinch when the unscripted question lands. He placed the pen down. No tapping now. Is your grievance your livelihood? The line hit like a dropped spotlight. Heavy, bright, impossible to ignore. In the bleachers, breaths paused. A camera crane tilted a degree closer, hunting for a twitch, a swallow, a tell. Harry didn't blink. Is your provocation yours? He asked. Greg smiled. A clean, TV-read half-moon that could mean anything. After the break, he said, we'll see whose answer holds. The band hit the bumper. Applause obeyed the light. But it wasn't relief applause. It was the sound people make when a thunderhead sits over the building and they pretend not to hear the first far-off crack. As the red light died, Greg looked down at his cards and didn't read them. Harry flexed his fingers once, like a boxer making sure both gloves still fit. Between them, a desk, 2 mugs, and the kind of silence that creates its own weather. The storm hadn't started. It had merely arrived. The commercial break ended, but the tension never did. When the red tally light blinked again, you could feel the shift, that subtle tightening in the room that happens when conversation stops being entertainment and starts becoming sport. Greg Gutfeld leaned forward in his chair, his cue cards untouched. The smile had returned, but it wasn't casual anymore. It was calculated, the kind that says, I know exactly where to push. Welcome back, he began smoothly, eyes flicking to the camera. We're here with Prince Harry, soldier, author, philanthropist, and perhaps the most polarizing man to ever trade a palace for a podcast. The audience chuckled, but uneasily. Harry's lips pressed into something that wasn't quite a smile. He folded his hands together, military neat, civilian polite. I don't see myself as polarizing, Harry said. I see myself as misunderstood. Greg arched a brow. Misunderstood. That's interesting. Because from where most people sit, you've had one of the biggest microphones in the world for years. Oprah, Netflix, book tours, podcasts. How much misunderstanding can survive that level of communication? Harry's gaze didn't move. Communication isn't the same as comprehension, he said. The louder I spoke, the more they twisted the echo. Greg nodded slowly, almost impressed by the phrasing. You've got away with words, he said. Almost poetic, but some might say, rehearsed. A few in the audience gasped quietly. That collective intake that signals the first jab has landed. Harry leaned back, posture straightening. I've spent my life rehearsing restraint, he replied. It's strange being criticized now for speaking at all. Greg smirked faintly. Oh, I don't mind you speaking, Harry. I just like to make sure it's not performance. That word, performance, hung in the air like a live wire. Harry blinked once, slow. You host a show built on performance, Greg. Everything here, the lights, the laughter, the interruptions. This is theater. Sure, Greg said easily. But I'm not pretending it's truth. That's your act tonight. The audience murmured, shifting like a restless sea. Harry's jaw tensed. Just a flicker, but enough for the camera to catch. You think I'm performing because I'm passionate, Harry said. Because I refuse to let tabloids or talk shows reduce my life to gossip fodder. Greg tilted his head. Oh, come on, Harry. You've done a documentary series about your life. You've published the inside stories, the arguments, the text messages, the palace politics. The problem isn't that people reduced your life to gossip. You handed it to them on a platter. Harry's eyes flashed. I handed truth to a world built on lies. Greg smiled. That's a very profitable kind of truth, isn't it? The audience gasped again, louder this time. Someone in the back muttered, ouch. Harry didn't rise to it immediately. He took a slow breath, the kind that looks like patience but feels like defense. I didn't do it for profit, he said. I did it because my silence was killing me. Greg leaned in, elbows on the desk. His voice dropped to that late-night whisper, intimate yet sharp. And yet, the more you speak, the richer you get. The more you share, the less private you seem. At what point does healing become branding? That line hit deep. Even the camera operators stopped their slow pans. Harry's gaze hardened, those steel blue eyes narrowing to slits. You're implying I'm a product, he said. Greg shrugged lightly. Aren't you? For a moment, the air itself felt fragile. Harry's voice came out low, quieter than before, which made it more dangerous. I'm a person who's lived through trauma most people can't comprehend. If you think I turned that into a brand, maybe that says more about what you choose to consume. Greg didn't blink. Oh, I consume plenty, Harry. But I also recognize when the chef's eating the same dish every night and calling it a revelation. The audience groaned softly, half in awe, half discomfort. Harry's composure cracked, only slightly. His leg twitched once, a soldier's muscle memory of confrontation. You love your metaphors, Harry said finally. But I'm not here to play verbal chess. I'm here to have a conversation. Greg smiled, then stopped treating questions like attacks. Harry's reply came sharp as glass, then stopped disguising attacks as questions. A murmur rolled through the audience, that rare moment when the tension is so real it feels unscripted even on live TV. Greg's smirk faltered for half a second, but only half. Fair enough, he said, hands up. Let's make this simple. You left the monarchy for peace, you say. Do you feel at peace now? Harry hesitated, just long enough for the silence to count. Peace isn't a place, he said finally. It's a process. Greg nodded slowly, pretending to accept it. So you're still processing. Harry caught the trap. We all are, he said smoothly. Even you. The audience chuckled nervously. Greg smiled back, but his eyes never smiled. Touché, Greg said. So let's process this next one together. He shuffled his cards but didn't read from them. When you left the UK, you said you wanted to protect your family from the press. But you've since given more interviews than the royal family combined. You've shared private letters, royal disagreements, even your brother's temper. How does that protect anyone? Harry exhaled through his nose. The smile was gone now, replaced by something colder. Truth protects, he said. Exposure protects. Silence protects no one but the powerful. Greg's tone turned softer, but his words didn't. Or maybe silence protects dignity. The studio went quiet. Not a cough, not a shuffle. Harry's stare was unwavering, but you could see the calculation behind it, the way someone raised under scrutiny learns to wear stillness like armor. Dignity without truth is theater, he said. And truth without restraint, Greg shot back, is self-destruction. The exchange was surgical now, precise, dangerous. Even the laughter sign stayed dark. The crowd knew they weren't in a comedy show anymore. They were in a collision. Greg sat back, folding his hands. Harry, let's strip this down to one honest question. Why are you really here tonight? Is it to promote your cause, your book, or just yourself? Harry didn't hesitate. I'm here because I'm tired of being defined by people who profit from misunderstanding me. Greg's grin sharpened. And yet here you are, on my show. The room rippled with uneasy laughter. Harry's tone dropped. Maybe I came here hoping one of you might listen instead of lecture. Greg raised an eyebrow. And how's that working out so far? Harry didn't answer, just looked at him, that royal stare sharpened by Hollywood lighting. Greg leaned back and said quietly, You know, you remind me of a man still fighting a war long after it ended. Harry didn't miss a beat. Maybe that's because the world keeps firing shots. The line landed like a punchline no one wanted to laugh at. Greg nodded once, slow. Then tonight, he said softly, let's see if you can take one more. The camera panned in on both men, the prince unflinching, the host calculating. The red light above the lens glowed like a warning flare. And for the first time all night, it wasn't clear which of them was about to break first. The applause faded quicker this time. The air in the Gutfeld studio had changed texture, no longer bright, no longer safe. You could almost hear the cameras humming as they tilted inward, closing the distance between host and guest like a slow zoom into a fight that neither side wanted to end too soon. Greg shuffled his cards again, more for rhythm than necessity. He wasn't reading anymore. He was navigating. Harry sat rigid, jaw locked, a picture of controlled defiance. Harry, Greg began lightly, you've mentioned wanting a normal life, a life outside the royal machine. But let's be honest, normal people don't have Netflix specials, memoirs, security details, or media teams. He leaned forward, voice soft but laced with irony. Do you ever worry that your idea of normal looks a lot like everyone else's definition of luxury? The audience stirred. A couple of hesitant laughs surfaced and then vanished, swallowed by the tension. Harry didn't flinch. Normal, he said slowly, isn't about income or status. It's about autonomy, the freedom to wake up and not have your every move predetermined by centuries of outdated expectations. Greg nodded slightly, as if conceding the definition, but his tone stayed razor-thin. And yet, he said, those outdated expectations gave you the platform you're still using. He smiled, small and deliberate. If you weren't a prince, we wouldn't be here, would we? The jab landed. The audience made that sound again, half gasp, half guilty thrill. Harry leaned forward, eyes narrowing. So that's what this is about? You think the title defines me? I didn't ask for it. I was born into it. I left it. I'm still explaining it. Greg held his stay, maybe because you can't quite let it go. That was a moment the crowd went silent again. Harry's lips parted, but for a second, no words came out. The muscle in his jaw ticked once, twice. Then, quietly, firmly, letting go isn't pretending it never existed. It's refusing to let it own you. Greg's smile stayed, but his eyes sharpened. Or milking it while you can. The audience reacted audibly, the kind of collective oh that feels like an open flame. Harry's tone darkened. You think this is about profit. It's about perspective. Greg laughed under his breath. Perspective sells, though, doesn't it? He tapped his pen against the desk. Netflix, Penguin Random House, Spotify. You've told your story from every possible angle. How long before it just becomes content? Harry's hands tightened on his knees. Maybe when hosts like you stop turning pain into punchlines. The crowd stirred again, uncomfortable, uncertain. Greg's voice flattened, quiet but cutting. You mean hosts who ask questions you don't like? Harry shot back instantly. I mean hosts who mistake cruelty for honesty. The studio froze. It wasn't loud anymore. It was electric. Greg leaned forward, elbows on the desk. You talk about cruelty, but let's not rewrite history. You've taken aim at your own family on global television. You've aired private arguments, released text messages, accused the institution of betrayal. Does empathy only work one way? Harry inhaled sharply through his nose. You think it's betrayal to tell the truth? To stop protecting people who never protected me? Greg's voice dropped, calm and deliberate. I think there's a difference between truth and revenge. A ripple ran through the audience. Harry blinked, his expression tightening. Revenge, he repeated. You call it revenge because I didn't play quiet little brother anymore. Because I stopped smiling on command. Because I dared to say, enough. Greg didn't move. I call it revenge when someone monopolizes their grievances and calls it therapy. The audience gasped. Harry's jaw locked, his posture suddenly rigid as a drawn bow. His accent sharpened, the edges of each word crisp and cold. You don't know me, he said. You know headlines. You know clickbait. You know the caricature that people like you built. Greg gave a small, humorless smile. Then set the record straight. Harry, who are you? Harry exhaled slowly. I'm a husband, a father, a man who saw his mother destroyed by this machine and decided not to let it happen again. The audience went still. It was the first time the word mother had entered the air. Even Greg's shoulders seemed to ease a fraction, but only for a moment. I get that, Greg said quietly. Everyone felt what happened to her. But isn't there a difference between honoring her memory and weaponizing her tragedy? Harry's eyes flashed, and for a second, the prince was gone. What sat there was just a man, furious, grieving, human. That's disgusting, he said flatly. You think this is about exploiting her? She's the reason I left that system. She's the reason I refused to bow to it. Because she tried to tell the truth and they silenced her. Greg's tone stayed measured. And now you're telling yours. Over and over. Loudly. To cameras. To millions. Maybe the system didn't silence her. Maybe it just learned how to sell it. Gasps rippled across the audience. One of the producers offstage motioned subtly, signaling for the host to wrap or pivot, but Greg didn't look away. Harry leaned forward, voice low, almost trembling with contained rage. You're proving my point, Greg. You mock pain. You twist it. You profit from it. And then you call me the opportunist. Greg sat back, crossing his arms. You're not the only one who's lived through pain, Harry. You're just the only one who keeps turning it into a brand. Harry froze. That word again. Brand. Something behind his eyes flickered. Maybe anger. Maybe exhaustion. You think I wanted any of this? He asked. The scrutiny, the judgment, the endless noise. You think I enjoy having to defend my family every time I speak? Greg didn't blink. I think you need it, he said softly. Because without it, you wouldn't know who you are. The words hit like a hammer. Even the studio lights seemed hotter now, washing both men in the same glare. Harry's response came out like a warning growl. You're wrong. Greg smiled faintly. Then prove it. Harry blinked, confusion crossing his face for the first time. Prove what? That you can exist without telling this story again, Greg said. That you can come on this show and talk about something other than the crown, the palace, the pain. Because right now, it's the only thing keeping you relevant. The audience let out another audible gasp. Harry's voice sharpened. You want relevance, Greg? Try asking a question that matters. Greg leaned in closer, his tone suddenly colder. They all matter, Harry. You just don't like the answers. Harry sat back, crossing his arms, the tightness returning to his jaw. I see what this is. You didn't invite me here for a conversation. You invited me for a spectacle. Greg gave a faint shrug. Maybe, or maybe you brought the spectacle with you. The camera panned across the audience, half in awe, half in disbelief. For the first time that night, Harry looked genuinely unsettled. His fingers tapped once against the desk, then stopped. Greg, sensing the crack, went in for the next blow. You say you left the monarchy for freedom, but every time you speak, you drag it back into the room. Maybe you didn't leave it at all. Maybe you just rebranded it under your name. The words landed like a final punch in the round. Harry stared at him, eyes burning, but the words wouldn't come. Greg sat back, calm as ever. "We'll take another short break," he said to the camera. "When we come back, we'll see if the prince who ran from the crown can finally face a question he can't control." The audience applauded on cue, but the sound was fractured, confused, conflicted, caught between sympathy and thrill. As the red light faded, Harry leaned back in his chair, breathing hard through his nose. Greg looked down at his notes again, but he wasn't reading them. He didn't need to. He already had his headline. The studio lights dimmed slightly as they came back from break, the audience whispering like the prelude to a storm. You could feel the tension now, alive, pulsing, crackling through the air. Prince Harry sat upright, his face calm but his knuckles white against the armrest. Greg Gutfeld looked relaxed, maybe too relaxed, the faint smile of a man who knew the next question would draw blood. "Welcome back," Greg said smoothly, his voice slicing through the murmurs. "We're here with Prince Harry, soldier, advocate, and a man who's turned his royal past into what some call a modern empire of influence." Harry didn't move, but his jaw tightened, that single tell the cameras loved. Greg continued, tone calm, conversational. "Now, we've talked about family, duty, freedom, but there's one person at the center of it all, Meghan." The crowd stared, knowing instinctively this was where the line might blur. Greg leaned in slightly. "When you first stepped back from royal life, many thought it was her idea, that she pulled you away. Others said she saved you. Which is it, Harry? Did Meghan lead you out, or did she lead you away?" Harry's expression didn't change, but the air did. It thinned. "I left on my own terms," Harry said, voice measured but hard. "The idea that a woman could somehow control me says more about the people making that claim than it does about our marriage." Greg's eyes gleamed faintly. "So she didn't influence the decision." Harry smiled, small, precise. "Every healthy marriage is built on influence, not control. We made the choice together, because we had to." Greg nodded slowly. "And yet, your critics would say you gave up 1,000 years of heritage for a Hollywood lifestyle." That landed. Harry's nostrils flared just slightly. "I gave up a gilded cage," he said. "If people mistake sunlight for luxury, that's their issue." Greg tilted his head, his smirk creeping back. "You call it sunlight. Some call it spotlight." The audience laughed nervously. Harry didn't. "Spotlight's nothing new to me," he said, quietly. "But at least now, I decide when it's on." Greg chuckled under his breath. "You sure about that? Because it looks like the spotlight hasn't dimmed. It's just been redirected." Harry leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" Greg placed his pen down deliberately. "Well, you've both built an identity around breaking free from the monarchy, but you keep invoking it. Interviews, docuseries, even children's books about royalty and kindness. Seems the crown never really left the picture." The audience reacted with a low "oh." Harry's tone sharpened. "You're mistaking context for obsession. I don't live in that shadow. I expose what it casts." Greg gave a slow, knowing nod. "So exposing it keeps you free." "Exactly," Harry said. "Truth dismantles power." Greg's reply was quiet, dangerous. "Or feeds it." The audience murmured again. A beat of silence. Then Greg leaned forward, elbows on the desk, voice dropping an octave. "Let's talk about Meghan a bit more. She's been called everything: hero, manipulator, visionary, victim. But what do you call her, Harry? Beyond the PR and production deals, who is she, really?" Harry blinked once, the faintest trace of disbelief flickering across his face. "She's my wife," he said firmly. "She's the woman I love, and she's endured more cruelty from people like you than anyone should have to." Greg nodded, almost sympathetically. "Cruelty's ugly, no doubt. But don't you think constant exposure invites it?" Harry's voice sharpened. "No one invites abuse." Greg's tone stayed smooth, even. "But visibility has a price. And you've made visibility your business." The words hit like slow poison. Polite, plausible, infuriating. Harry straightened in his chair. "What exactly are you implying, Greg?" "I'm implying," Greg said, leaning back. That maybe you didn't escape the institution. You just built your own. Same spotlight, new brand. Only now, you're the king and queen of the narrative. The audience gasped softly. Harry's face hardened. His accent, usually polished and restrained, broke with sharp edges. That's a disgusting thing to say. Greg's smirk didn't falter. Why? You've done interviews about empowerment, victimhood, race, privilege. It's all content, Harry. Maybe noble content, but still content. Harry shot back. You think because I use my platform to talk about injustice, it's a brand? That says everything about you, not me. Greg shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe it says something about what happens when a prince tries to become a preacher. That line drew a collective groan from the audience. Even the camera operators exchanged a quick glance. Harry leaned forward now, his calm slipping away entirely. You mock everything you don't understand, he said, voice rising. You tone people's lives into punchlines and call it commentary. Greg's tone stayed mild, but the smile was gone. And you turn privilege into persecution and call it activism. The audience went silent again. The air between them was toxic now, volatile. Harry exhaled hard through his nose. You're unbelievable. Greg folded his hands together, unhurried. So are you. A prince who wants privacy but can't stop performing. The tension broke like glass. Harry slammed his hand lightly against the armrest. You have no right, none, to lecture me on what privacy means. You sit here every night peddling outrage and pretending it's wit. You don't live under siege. You don't know what it's like to have your family hunted for headlines. Greg didn't blink, and yet you've given them plenty more. The words hung there, sharp, merciless. Harry's breathing was heavier now. His jaw flexed. His hand trembled once before he clasped it in his lap. Greg glanced toward the camera, that small, knowing look, and turned back to Harry. You said earlier you left to protect your family. But some say you've done more to endanger them, by keeping their names alive in every scandal. Do you regret that? Harry froze. That question, that precise phrasing, had the power of a landmine. Regret? He repeated slowly. No, I regret trusting people who twist everything I say into poison. I regret conversations like this. Greg nodded once, slow, unbothered. Then maybe the real problem isn't the palace. Maybe it's the mirror. That did it. Harry leaned forward, eyes blazing. Don't you dare patronize me. Greg raised an eyebrow. I'm just saying, maybe the enemy you're fighting doesn't wear a crown anymore. Maybe it weighs your reflection. The studio went dead quiet. For a long moment, Harry didn't speak. His breathing was audible. His composure, once bulletproof, was visibly cracking. Finally, he said softly, you think this is clever. You think this is journalism. It's not. It's cruelty dressed as curiosity. Greg didn't argue. He just sat back, calm, confident, victorious in stillness. Cruelty, he said after a pause. You wanted to talk about accountability. This is what it looks like. Harry stood, not abruptly, but slowly, deliberately. The studio's collective breath hitched. Greg looked up at him. You leaving already? Harry's voice came low and controlled. No, Greg. I'm remembering why I left the UK. The line hit like a silent explosion. The audience gasped. Some even applauded. Greg's smirk faltered, just slightly. Harry sat back down, spine straight, face unreadable. The message was clear. You won't chase me off my own words. Greg adjusted his tie, voice tightening for the first time. All right, he said. Then let's finish this properly. No PR, no palace, just you. Because after tonight, people won't be talking about your family. They'll be talking about you. Harry stayed him down. They always are. The red light above the camera flickered again. The show wasn't over, but something inside this room had changed forever. The crowd sat frozen, caught between applause and disbelief, as the segment faded to commercial. Harry leaned back, closing his eyes for a single, silent moment. Greg turned to the producer and muttered, We're going viral tonight. He wasn't wrong. The red light blinked on again. The cameras live, the air suffocating. When the applause faded, it wasn't warmth that filled the room. It was anticipation. The kind of charged silence you get before a thunderclap. Greg Gutfeld leaned forward, smiling for the viewers at home, but not for the man sitting across from him. Prince Harry's posture was rigid, his composure stretched tight like glass under pressure. His eyes stayed fixed, calm, defiant, and just a little weary. "Welcome back," Greg said lightly, glancing toward the audience. "If you're just joining us, we're having a spirited discussion with Prince Harry about truth, freedom, and maybe a little contradiction." The audience chuckled nervously. Harry didn't. Greg continued, his tone tightening. "Harry, you've talked about the pain of the past, the struggles of family, and your desire to live privately. But it's been 4 years, and you're still talking about it. Is this healing or habit?" Harry's lips thinned. "Healing isn't linear," he said evenly. "When you've lived through a machine that profits off your pain, speaking becomes survival." Greg smiled faintly. "And yet, survival seems to come with a production deal these days." A soft ripple of laughter moved through the audience. Harry didn't move. "It's easy to mock what you don't understand, Greg. But the people who've been silenced know exactly what I mean." Greg nodded thoughtfully, then set his cards aside, a quiet sign he was done pretending to read from them. "Let's cut through the PR," he said. "You left royalty for independence, but what you've built looks a lot like a monarchy with microphones. You're still commanding attention, headlines, reverence, just under a new flag." Harry exhaled, visibly steadying himself. "If I wanted reverence, I'd have stayed. I wanted honesty." Greg's eyes locked on him. "Honesty or attention?" The audience gasped, then hushed immediately. Harry leaned forward, his voice dropping low. "You think attention heals. It doesn't. It exposes. It forces truth into the open. And some people, clearly, can't handle that." Greg's smirk deepened. "Truth's one thing, Harry. But self-promotion dressed as truth, that's something else entirely." The temperature in the room seemed to climb. Harry's accent sharpened, crisp as glass. "You're twisting every word because it sells conflict. That's not truth, Greg. It's entertainment." "Exactly," Greg said, tapping the desk. "And you've mastered it too." That line hit like a bullet. The audience murmured again, half awe, half discomfort. Harry blinked once, his jaw tightening. "You really think this is a game, don't you? That all this, the loss, the grief, the weight, is just content to you?" Greg shrugged lightly. "No, I think it's content to you." That did it. The air shifted. The laughter signs stayed dark. The audience froze, knowing something real was about to happen. Harry leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice tight. "You can throw as many insults as you want, Greg. You can hide behind sarcasm, mock empathy, and cheap wit. But the truth is, you thrive on tearing people down." Greg didn't blink. "And you thrive on pretending you're still one of them, while cashing checks off their sympathy." Harry's voice rose, breaking the calm. "I never asked for sympathy." Greg's reply was quick, surgical. "You just marketed it." The crowd gasped audibly now. Even the crew looked uneasy. Harry stood suddenly, not explosive, but with that quiet, dangerous resolve that said enough. The studio fell silent, all movement stopping except for the red light blinking above the camera. "Do you have any idea," Harry began, his tone trembling with restrained fury, "what it's like to wake up and see your family, your wife, your children dissected by people who will never meet them? To be turned into a villain for daring to step out of line?" Greg rose too, slowly. "You made yourself the story, Harry. I was the story before I ever had a choice." Harry snapped. "Born into a narrative I didn't write. Forced into a system that valued headlines over humanity. I didn't create the spotlight. I survived it." Greg's tone stayed even, quiet, deadly. "And now you sell the survival." The silence that followed was deafening. Harry stayed at him, eyes hard, breath heavy, the kind of stare that comes from years of holding back everything you wanted to say. Then he spoke, each word measured and cutting. "You call this journalism, Greg, but it's just cruelty with better lighting." The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay quiet. Greg didn't answer right away. He just stood, letting the silence hang. Finally, he said softly, "Cruelty is when you turn your family into your career." Harry's eyes flashed, and for the first time all night, emotion overtook discipline. His voice rose, not loud, but raw. "You think I wanted to? You think I enjoyed airing pain that should have stayed private? I did it because the truth was buried with my mother." Gasps filled the room. Even Greg blinked, his expression faltering for a brief, human second. Harry continued, his voice breaking slightly. "She was destroyed by the same system you're mocking me for leaving. The cameras, the ridicule, the endless spin. And now I sit here, 30 years later, and it's still the same. You're still feeding the same monster." Greg recovered quickly, but the moment had cut him too. He cleared his throat. "I understand loss, Harry. Everyone does. But grief doesn't excuse hypocrisy." Harry looked at him sharply. "And cruelty doesn't excuse ratings." A murmur swept through the audience, this time unmistakably on Harry's side. Greg crossed his arms. "You can play the victim, or you can face accountability." Harry stepped closer to the desk, eyes locked on Greg's. "Accountability? You think I owe you that? I owe my family the truth. The world can make of it what it wants." Greg's voice hardened. "You owe the truth to the people you've dragged through it." That was the final cut. Harry stayed at him, chest heaving, then said, quietly, clearly, "You don't get to talk about my family." Greg met his stare, unmoved, then stopped selling them. The words hit like a final slap. The audience gasped audibly. Someone even said, "Whoa," from the back row. Harry froze for a beat, then reached for the microphone clipped to his collar and ripped it free. The sound crackled harshly in the studio speakers. "You think this is entertainment," he said, his voice echoing raw and unfiltered now. "But this is exactly why I walked away. From the palace, from the press, from people like you." Greg straightened. "People like me?" Harry nodded, eyes blazing. "People who confuse cruelty for courage. Who sit on a stage and call it truth-telling while profiting off pain." Greg opened his mouth, but Harry cut him off, his tone final. "I've had enough. You wanted a spectacle. Congratulations, you got it." He dropped the mic on the desk with a sharp, heavy thud. The sound reverberated through the studio like a gunshot. Then, silence. Greg stood still, expression unreadable. The audience didn't move. The cameras followed Harry as he turned, walked off the stage, and disappeared behind the curtain without looking back. For a long moment, Greg said nothing. Then, calmly, he straightened his tie, glanced at the camera, and smiled faintly. "Well," he said softly, "I guess that's one way to make an exit." The crowd hesitated, then erupted into uneasy applause, half in shock, half in thrill. Greg leaned against his desk, his tone perfectly controlled. "Prince Harry," he said, "a man who wanted privacy and just gave the world another headline." He paused, eyes glinting beneath the studio lights. "Stick around. We'll be right back." The music swelled, the lights dimmed, and the internet, in real time, began to explode. The moment Prince Harry vanished behind the red stage curtain, the Gutfeld studio dissolved into chaos. The applause light blinked, but no one clapped. The audience sat frozen, eyes darting between the empty chair and Greg Gutfeld, who stood motionless beside his desk, his expression unreadable. The sound of the dropped microphone still seemed to echo in the air, that sharp, metallic thud that had punctuated the end of civility. For several long seconds, no one moved. Then the floor manager gestured wildly for the house band to play. A burst of awkward music filled the studio, too loud, too cheerful, masking the stunned silence. Greg didn't speak. Not yet. He simply looked toward the camera, then to his crew, then back at the audience, eyes calculating, cold, and oddly calm. The director's voice crackled in his earpiece. "Greg, we're cutting to commercial. Just stay still." He gave a single nod. The red light above the camera blinked off. Only then did Greg exhale, a long, controlled breath through his nose, before turning toward the wings. A couple of producers were already sprinting after Harry, headsets pressed to their ears, whispering into microphones. The show's PR team huddled near the control booth, arguing over which feed to cut from the replay loop. For the first time in his career, Greg Gutfeld, the master of spin, had no script. Backstage, the air felt even thicker. Prince Harry was moving fast, past makeup chairs, past cables, past stunned interns who'd stopped in their tracks. One assistant tried to catch up, holding out his blazer, stammering, "Sir, your jacket." But Harry didn't even turn. His face was flushed, his hands trembling slightly. He wasn't angry anymore, not visibly. What radiated from him now was something colder. Disbelief. Exhaustion. The weight of years condensed into a few cutting minutes of live television. He stopped briefly by the exit door, pressing his palms to his temples, eyes closed. The hum of the studio behind him felt distant now, like static. A producer approached gently. "Prince Harry, if you'd like to make a brief post-segment statement, we can." Harry turned, his voice low, controlled. "No statements. You've had enough of me for one night." And with that, he pushed open the exit door and stepped into the cool night air. Back inside, the production control room erupted into damage control. Phones buzzed with calls from Fox PR, from executives, from journalists already tweeting. One intern shouted, "CNN's clipping it. TMZ's got the video feed." Another yelled back, "We need the rights claim now. We can't let them air the full walkout before us." Greg, meanwhile, had returned to his seat. A makeup artist hovered near him with a brush, but he waved her off. His reflection in the desk's glossy surface looked almost amused. He muttered under his breath, "Well, that went well." A junior producer approached hesitantly. "Greg, PR says to issue a neutral statement. Something about mutual respect, unfortunate escalation, that kind of thing." Greg looked up, smirking. "Neutral? The guy just walked off live TV. That's not neutral, that's history." "Still," she replied nervously, "they want to contain it before it trends." Greg leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Contain it? It's already trending." He was right. In less than 10 minutes, clips of Harry ripping off his microphone had hit Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, and Reddit. A shaky phone recording from an audience member captioned "Prince Harry storms off Gutfeld live" had already hit 1.2 million views. The comments were flooding in. "Never seen anything like this. Greg destroyed him. That was hard to watch. Dude looked broken. Prince Harry can't handle accountability." Within an hour, #Harry walks out, #Gutfeld clash, and #Royal meltdown were all trending in the US, Canada, and the UK. Even the BBC ran a breaking headline. "Prince Harry walks off American talk show after heated argument with host." Across Los Angeles, the story exploded. Clips ran on every major outlet. Fox replayed the segment with dramatic voiceovers. CNN dissected Greg's tone. BBC News ran it on loop, the chyron flashing the walkout scene around the world. In Santa Barbara, Meghan sat alone in their Montecito kitchen, staring at the television. The footage replayed again and again. Greg leaning forward, Harry standing, the mic falling, the walkout. Her jaw tightened. She muted the volume and leaned back in her chair. "This is exactly what they wanted," she whispered. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from PR representatives, lawyers, friends, even distant acquaintances. "Are you okay?" He handled it well, mostly. "Do not go on social media." But social media was already roaring. A clip of Greg's closing line, "A man who wanted privacy and just gave the world another headline," was being remixed, memed, parodied. Some called Greg brave. Others called him cruel. For once, public opinion wasn't split along political lines. It was chaos. Everyone had an opinion. By midnight, every major YouTube commentary channel had uploaded reaction videos. Pundits called it television history. Critics called it an ambush. Fans called it karma. And somewhere between those narratives, the truth, as always, got buried. The next morning, newspapers across the world plastered Harry's face across their front pages. "Prince walks off. Gutfeld versus the Duke, TV blows up. Royal meltdown in America. Greg woke to find his name in headlines too, praised and condemned in equal measure. He poured himself a black coffee, turned on his phone, and scrolled through the chaos. CNN wanted him for comment. So did The Guardian. Even Sky News had left 3 voicemails. He grinned faintly. Controversy, the oldest currency in television. His phone buzzed again. A text from Fox PR. We'll issue a joint statement saying it was an emotional discussion. Please don't tweet until cleared. He ignored it. Meanwhile, in California, Harry and Meghan's team gathered in their kitchen. PR advisors circled like hawks, phones and laptops open to trending dashboards. One aide spoke cautiously. If we ignore it, it'll die down in 72 hours. If we address it, it doubles. Harry said nothing for a long moment, staring out the window toward the garden. Quiet, sunlit, peaceful, the opposite of everything that happened the night before. Finally, he said softly, they always twist it. Always. Meghan placed a hand on his shoulder. Then stopped letting them. Let it go. Harry nodded slowly, but his eyes stayed distant. Let it go, he repeated. Right. But Greg didn't let it go. That evening, he opened his show with a smirk that told the audience everything they needed to know. Last night, he began, we had a very special guest, Prince Harry. Things got spirited. And while I respect anyone willing to speak their mind, I also respect the truth. So tonight, we'll be doing something very rare in late-night television. We'll be replaying the entire uncut exchange. The audience erupted. Twitter melted down. The network's ratings quadrupled overnight. Harry's team watched from Montecito, silent, helpless, furious. Because the story was no longer his. It belonged to the machine now. The same one he thought he'd escaped. By dawn, analysts were calling it the media moment of the decade. Universities debated it. Psychologists dissected it. Late-night monologues referenced it. A single, unguarded walkout had become a global referendum on privacy, fame, power, and truth. And somewhere in that noise, Prince Harry sat on his terrace, barefoot, staring at the California sunrise, the same man who once said he left the palace to find peace. He smiled bitterly. Even freedom, it seemed, came with a price. The world had taken sides. The war of perception had begun. By sunrise, the walkout had mutated from a clip into a chorus. Cable panels stacked rectangles of talking heads. Newspaper columns sprouted overnight like weeds after rain. Your aunt on Facebook shared a zoomed-in, low-res still with a caption about accountability, while your cousin on TikTok lip-synced Greg's closing line into a hairbrush. It wasn't just a moment anymore. It was a mirror, and everyone used it to see what they already believed. Greg arrived at the studio to a hallway of congratulatory nods and a few tight-lipped stays. Ratings reports waited on his desk like trophies. 4 times the usual audience. Spikes in every demo. He skimmed, satisfied, then slid the pages aside. The wins didn't interest him for long. He wanted the legacy. He wanted the clip to outlive the day. His executive producer knocked. You're trending #1 in the US and #3 globally. But there's pushback. From who? Greg asked, already knowing. Journalism professors, media ethicists, a handful of British anchors, some American columnists. Ambush. Bad faith. Performative cruelty. You've got a petition with 70,000 signatures asking for an apology. Greg smirked. 70,000 signatures is called a weekday. She didn't smile back. It's not just outrage for sport. A few thoughtful pieces. They are asking whether we confuse spectacle with truth. Whether we cornered a man and called it accountability. Greg leaned back, laced his fingers behind his head, and stared at the ceiling. Maybe they should have watched the entire interview. We aired the entire interview. Exactly. In Montecito, the kitchen became a war room again. Harry stood by the sink, staring at his phone like it had betrayed him. Meghan scrolled through a media brief, eyes scanning, face still. Their comms director, a woman with a tidy bob and an even tidier way of speaking, delivered the morning readout. Sentiments volatile. You're polarizing, yes, but not catastrophic. Walkouts poll better than meltdowns. The clip where you say I escaped is playing well with your base, terribly with the middle. Harry exhaled. The middle never liked me. They did, Megan said gently. Once. The comms director laid out two choices on the oak table like surgical instruments. Option 1, silence. This burns off in 48 to 72 hours. Option 2, a calibrated response. Calm, measured, forward-looking. No insults, no counterpunches. We talk values, not vendettas. Harry stayed at the window. Beyond the glass, the garden glowed with early light. Roses, lavender, the exquisite quiet you can't buy in London even with a crown. And option 3. Don't. The director shook her head. If you go raw, you'll win the battle and lose the war. Megan slid the brief toward him. Speak to the people who still want to hear you. Ignore the ones who never will. He nodded, once. Draft it. And Harry, the director added, soft but firm, no improvising. He almost smiled. When have I ever? Megan did smile, but only a little. By noon, a new storm cell gathered, from an unexpected direction. A veterans non-profit posted a thread, clips of Harry at rehab clinics, on forgotten bases, in the rain at dawn hugging a soldier who didn't want to cry on camera. We've seen him when there are no lights, it read. It wasn't performance. A former Palisade, anonymous but well-placed, told a reporter he was always the first to kneel on the floor with a child. Media never printed that. Didn't sell. An old rugby mate posted a single sentence under a photo of a muddy pitch. He got up when we couldn't. None of it reversed the tide. It complicated it, which is sometimes the better truth. Greg's team debated their opening. He listened, stone still, while they rehearsed a hedged, sleek monologue that apologized for nothing and empathized with everything. He could deliver it perfectly. He knew the notes by heart. He tossed the paper into the bin. Put me on camera, he said. Live. The red light blinked. The audience hushed. Last night, he began, we had a conversation that turned into a confrontation. I won't insult you with a pretend surprise. I ask hard questions. That's the job. And if you sit in that chair, you know what you're getting. He paused. The smoke dialed down to something closer to a human face. But here's what I'll also say. There's a difference between hard and cruel. I thought I was on the right side of that line. Some of you think I wasn't. I hear you. A flicker passed through the room. A rare draft of humility in air-conditioned TV. I won't retract the questions, he continued. They matter. Public figures don't get safety rails. But I'll own the heat. If I enjoyed the fire more than the light, that's on me. He pivoted, the blade returning. As for the larger narrative, the one where we confuse transparency with performance, that's the conversation the country should have. I'll have it here, with him, or without him. The audience applauded. Not thunder, something steadier. Respect's quieter register. At 5 p.m., Harry's video went up. A single shot, no Chiron, no B-roll. A wooden table, a glass of water, sunlight on his left shoulder. He looked like a man who had slept and then gone for a run and then decided to speak like this exactly once. Last night, he began, wasn't my finest hour. Megan watched from just off camera, invisible, present. I've asked for privacy and I've also told my story, he said. Both are true and both are complicated. There's no contradiction in choosing your moments. That's what people call agency. It's the same thing every citizen uses when they decide what to share and what to guard. He took a slow breath. I walked out because I felt baited, he said. Maybe I was. Maybe I wasn't. But I also walked out because I felt myself going somewhere I don't want to live anymore. The place where the only tool is anger. His eyes lifted to the lens. I won't insult you with slogans. I left an institution that didn't fit me. I still love people inside it. I work on causes that matter to me. If that's a brand to you, I can't change your mind. If it's a life to you, thank you for seeing it. Another breath. He softened, just enough. To the veterans I serve with, to the advocates who stand with us, to the people who still write me letters about grief and hope, I heard you today. I won't stop doing the quiet work because the loud work gets headlines. He closed simply. I wish the show well. I wish the conversation better. 10 minutes later, I wish the conversation better trended on Twitter, not as a dunk, not as a chant, but as something stranger for the internet, a phrase people used to talk to each other instead of past each other. Night fell. The second day takes arrived, breathless and less certain. The walkout hardened into a story about lines. When to press, when to stop, what accountability sounds like, and how easily grievance impersonates truth when the microphones are hungry. Greg's ratings held. Harry's video hit 12 million views by breakfast. The petitions kept circulating. So did the rugby photo. The veterans thread passed 1 million likes and quietly started a fundraiser that surpassed its goal in 3 hours. None of it felt like vindication. All of it felt like oxygen after a fire. In New York, Greg stepped onto his terrace with a scotch and an old paperback. He didn't open it. He stared at the skyline, orange and steel. His phone buzzed with a text from a name he hadn't saved, a producer across the dial who didn't owe him anything. That was one of your better opens. Keep the light. He put the phone down and let the city hum. In California, Harry stood barefoot in the grass, eyes on the dark line where the ocean becomes rumor. Megan joined him, shoulder to shoulder. They didn't speak for a while. Finally, she said, "You did the right thing today." "Which part?" he asked. "Not breaking," she said. He nodded, the kind of nod you give to a promise you're still learning to keep. The clip would live forever. They all do now. But what lived alongside it? The apology that wasn't quite, the statement that didn't bite, the small avalanche of strangers remembering a better version of someone they thought they were done with. That lived, too. Maybe that was the reckoning. Not triumph. Not defeat. Consequence. The price of a microphone. The cost of walking off and the cost of staying seated. Two men stood on opposite coasts, each believing he'd won something and lost something else. The world didn't crown a victor. It did what the world always does. It moved on, carrying the echo. And somewhere, faint but stubborn, the phrase kept circulating like a message in a bottle. Let's make the conversation better.